Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about zodiac signs and emotion. Now, as far as the elements go, the water element, I would say by far is the most emotional on average. Whether it's expressing just general upsetment, despondency, sadness, anger, their emotions are very outwardly shown, I would say, and they're the most demonstrative, I would say, of the four elements. Now, the earth signs, on the other hand, are not as much inclined to display emotions as frequently as opposed to the water signs. But I think the emotions with the earth signs are more protracted, and they seem to be more prolonged, but on average less frequent. Now, if you look at the air signs, I would say that's pretty much unequivocally, at least in my opinion, the least emotional of the elements. Now, it's not to say that air signs don't have feelings or compassion and they don't have any sensitivity. They just don't show it as much, and I think the air signs, because it's the more intellectual of the elements and they're more objective, I think that has something to do with that. Now, as far as the fire signs go, now fire signs, it's not so much about sensitivity, but it's more about their exuberance, enthusiasm, and it's being passionate. I think you see emotions are there, but it's not so much in like the crying or sadness emotions. You see it more in just their fiery temperament that's connected with the fire element now. And it's probably fire signs can be somewhat disputatious, and they can be argumentative more so than the other elements. I think you see it more when they're maybe in combative situation with somebody, more of an anger type expression of emotion. But overall, I still believe the water takes the prize in terms of as far as the most emotional of all these elements. Now, I'm going to go by signs, going in order, starting with Aries and ending with Pisces. Now, Aries is a sign that you're not going to see Aries type go down and being very despondent, and as far as the crying emotional side of things. But Aries can be very passionate, and is more, as far as the anger goes, I would say it's a fire sign. They have a fiery temperament. You will see that a little bit more come out with Aries more so than the other signs. Now, but as far as comparing it to like a water sign, it's obviously not one that's going to show like that kind of emotion, the sadness or the feelings hurt. But at the same time, and if an Aries is angry, you're going to know about it, and that's what they express very strongly, I believe, being ruled by Mars. Now, Taurus is a sign where Taurus can be demonstrative. Being an earth sign, it's like the emotions, I believe, they're not as frequent as, say, a Cancer, Pisces, or Scorpio, but when they come out, they could be very protracted. And Taurus people can, because they can be, I mean, I have Taurus rising, I have a sun in Cancer and a stellium in Cancer, so that obviously factors in. Taurus, especially like a Taurus rising, if they have Cancer often on the third house cusp, this could show somebody that could be sensitive in communications. And they, I think with Taurus, even though it's not shown on the surface, they can be sensitive, but they don't express the emotions necessarily as exuberantly as a water sign. But there is, I think, some sensitivity with this sign. But when emotions do come out, and with Taurus, I think they can be very sustained. Now, with Gemini is the type that could have a manifold of emotions. This is arguably the most versatile sign, and I think it can apply as far as emotions may go. But being an air sign, it is intellectual, very objective, and The emotions of Gemini can be seen by others as superficial. A number of you may have seen that video I made, the misconceptions about Gemini. And Gemini can actually, because they're so, I think, diversified on that emotional level, though, they can be very sensitive. But as far as actually letting out that crying and showing that side of others, that they can have the difficulty. But it's not to say that Geminis are not sensitive or they're devoid of any compassion or sensitivity. But as far as the emotional side, it's not, obviously it's not going to be shown, at least on the surface, to many people. Now, we look at Cancer. Now, Cancer can be arguably the most sensitive sign. I think it's between kind of them and Pisces. Now, Cancer can really be a sign which you don't ever want to say a sign is too compassionate or too nurturing or too caring, but Cancer can become very emotional due to the fact that they can be very sensitive, and their feelings can get hurt easier than the average zodiac sign. And this is a sign that is really not one that's apprehensive or reluctant to show their emotions or really hold back or placate their emotions. They just kind of let it all out, I think. And I mean, I should know I have a stellium in Cancer, as I stated before, and my moon, even though it's in Gemini, it's in the first house. So I think that says a lot right there. Now Leo is the type that would show, I think, emotions more in connection perhaps with pride. Leo is very dignified, and the Leo, I see them being a fire sign. It's similar like with Aries, as far as kind of like when the emotions come out, it can often be kind of in an anger or type acrimonious type of emotion. And being a fire sign, I think could be very passionate as well. But as far as that emotional side, it's connected more, I think, with just the fiery temperament of the sign, very much like Aries. So the next sign we go to is Virgo. Now, Virgo, being an earth sign, is similar to Taurus in the sense that the emotions of an earth sign, I believe, are less frequent on average as opposed to a water sign, but they can be more protracted and prolonged. Now, Virgo is similar to Gemini because it's ruled by Mercury, and their nature is very intellectual. Virgos can be very analytical, and they're often, I think, because they're in that analysis mode and they're trying to analyze a situation, or if somebody says something like a derisive or ridiculing remark to Virgo, they're kind of the type to kind of combat you verbally, similar to Gemini, and come up with a nice, I guess you could say, a witticism or witty comment, or something that they're going to come up with that they feel that you're not going to have a good comeback for. So Virgo is not really very demonstrative. But like Taurus, I think when they do express it, it's more of a protracted or prolonged type of emotion. Now, Libra, okay, this is the second air sign I'm talking about. Now, Libra, similar to Gemini, is not, as far as showing their emotions, it's not going to be very strong, because air signs are, I believe, the most intellectual of the elements and in the objective side. But I think that Libra is a fair and equitable sign. I feel it's very balanced, so they could have their emotions in moderation maybe, but not going overboard in one particular emotion. So it's kind of like that fair amount of each one, but it's not where their emotions are all encompassing or all embracing. So the next sign, Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is an intriguing sign because Scorpio, is being a water sign, I believe could be very sensitive and will not necessarily show their emotions readily to others in many instances. Emotions may be very controlled and suppressed with Scorpio because they don't necessarily like to show that emotional side to them, but when it comes out, it can come out very strongly, and it is a water sign, so Scorpios can be very intensely emotional. You don't want to really make a Scorpio person really push them to their limits, because those emotions can really come out very strong and intense, and it's a very powerful part of their makeup, I believe. Now, the next sign, Sagittarius. Well, Sagittarius, being a fire sign, okay, Sag is very exuberant. Sagittarius can be very ebullient. They're expansive. They have that happy-go-lucky nature. Sagittarius is not a sign that you really correlate with emotions strongly, as far as that crying, that sadness. But you'll see them they could be very fiery, of course. And Sagittarius try to see, as a lot of you know, the positive aspect or element in things, and they can be very expansive and optimistic. They simply don't want to be around people that are going to make them furlong or melancholy. So they don't necessarily show a lot of sensitivity to others, because they want to have that jocular side being expressed constantly, and they don't want to become too despondent. They really, I believe Sag likes to be around very happy people, because they don't want the negative mood of someone to rub off on them. But at the same time, Sagittarius, all signs have sensitivity, I believe, but Sag is one of the ones that just doesn't really necessarily like to show that to others, and the emotional quality is more of the fiery emotion. I think you see like the passion, and sometimes the comes out perhaps in a disputatious situation with someone, because the fire signs are, I would believe, at least in my opinion, they're probably the more argumentative of the as far as the elements go. Now, Capricorn. Now, Capricorn is a sign where a lot of people look at on the surface, okay, seem to be undemonstrative, and they might come across to others, perhaps sometimes they might not look like they're very compassionate, and on the surface a lot they may not appear that way, but Capricorns being an earth sign, as I stated with the other two earth signs, the emotions may not come out as often as like a Cancer or a Pisces, for example, but they still can have sustained, as far as sustained emotions go. And Capricorns have a very serious look to them, and very stern disposition and serious. But at the same time, I think due to the seriousness of Capricorn, they can have certain sensitivity, because they do take a lot of things in a very serious manner, but it's just not always readily shown to others. And I think when it comes out, it's similar to Taurus and Virgo, where the emotions are more protracted and prolonged. Now, Aquarius, okay, being the last of the air signs I'm talking about, similar to Libra and Gemini. Well, Aquarius is a lot about thinking, about being objective, and they're strongly connected with ideas. And the Aquarian is, though, very humanitarian often, and philanthropic, and likes to help other people out, and can show this compassionate side to others in this manner. But Aquarius, being an air sign like Gemini, like Libra, is probably one of the least, at least what we see, as far as the emotions go, and are not always really come out strongly to others. So, and this is because because the sign is intellectual, and it's like Gemini, like Libra, and being like this objective frame of mind, that they really they're not really focusing on the emotional aspect or element of things. And this is not to say the signs I've talked about that don't show a lot of emotion are not sensitive, because that couldn't be further from the truth. Sensitivity and in showing emotions, being demonstrative with emotions, are two different things, I believe. And Aquarius is not the type to really, on average, to show that kind of strong emotion, at least not outwardly, I believe, anyway. Now, last but not least, Pisces. Now, an argument could be made that Pisces might be the most emotional of all the zodiac signs. In Pisces, I think, similar to Cancer, the emotions can be all encompassing. Pisces can be very sensitive and may cry perhaps more easily than the other zodiac signs on average. And Pisces, I think the reason this is at least somewhat attributed to is because Pisces can be very idealistic. And I think what happens is, it's not that they're necessarily oblivious to the negative characteristics in others, but they try to block them out often, and they want to focus and emphasize on the positive. And when the negative of somebody really hits them, and they allow themselves to truly, really look at it and take in, well, damn, this person wasn't really 100% what I thought, and so on and so forth. Or when the Pisces is finally trying, maybe they're looking to see this positive, and they can't, and they don't see it, and they realize, okay, because in some instances with some people there may be very little positive. And what happens is, I think they get so let down, and that's when you see that a lot of that sensitivity, or that strong emotional side come out. And it's a lot of it is attributed to that idealistic nature that Pisces, they're not necessarily oblivious to negatives of somebody, but a lot of times they'll choose not to see it, and they'll try to focus on the positive, and a lot of times they find out that the negative is really strongly overriding the positive. That's when they deeply get hurt. And that's, well, a lot of times you see them with such, they experience such profound emotion, Pisces. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for zodiac signs and emotions. And stay tuned next time, where I will be continuing my series on planets, energies that are unaspected in the natal chart. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because a person astrologically is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.